Hey everybody, we're back and I'm so elated to bring in one of my good friends. He is the president of the National Basketball Players Association, and he has also been on the road, hitting the streets, COVID conscious canvassing.
That's
I always
right.
mess that up.
That's right.
Andrew, I'm so elated that we have Chris here with
Chris
us
Paul, everybody. What's up, man? Welcome.
No, appreciate y'all having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Chris, I know that you were just in North Carolina, in your home state, knocking on doors, campaigning with the Biden-Harris team. Talk about some of what you heard. I want to hear some good stuff and some of the things that gave you a little bit of pause.
Yeah, please.
I mean, just on that tour, first and foremost, I think actually going to the campuses and seeing these kids who really have an impact. And I think the thing that I try to spread to them is that they're not our future, they're our right now. Mm-hmm. And the dopest part, I think, was when I was over at Winston State. I was asking the kids, I was like, have y'all registered? Have y'all registered? And they looked like I disrespected them. They was like, registered? We done voted already.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So that was nice to see, because I kept telling them at 18 years of age, there was no one who was talking to me about the importance of voting. So as long as they understand their power and the shift in community and education right now, I think that's a huge deal.
That is a big deal. And I love the righteousness of those brothers and sisters being like, of course we have registered to vote. And Chris, right. You probably know this, but it's kind of the tradition within HBCUs, man. You get registered and you go and vote. And the absence of doing that might cause you some public shame and embarrassment. But the truth is that is not the situation, unfortunately, across all of our community. What I know about you, aside from being a phenomenal basketball player and an awesome community advocate, is you can walk into a place and you get automatic credibility with, say, for instance, a group of black men. And right now, we're struggling to make sure that black men are seeing themselves reflected in all aspects of society and also want to be included in what is the vision for the American dream. And the absence of getting the ladder that leads to that American dream can cause great frustration, political angst, a decision to pull out of the process completely. And I'm just wondering, for you as a brother who interacts so often with us, what are you telling? What advice do you give? How do you stare that challenge directly in the face and still say it's worth it to stay in the game?
Man, Andrew, that's a hell of a question. That's deep. That's real deep. And I like to say to that, I think a lot of times people see you where you are now and don't necessarily see where you came from.
All right.
And all that different type of stuff. So for me, one of the things that I know is that a lot of people from where I grew up and a lot of people back home, a lot of times they don't see the necessary changes that they would like to see. So they say, why the hell should I vote? Yeah. You know, does my vote count? Does it matter? I think also as men, especially as black men, a lot of times we're afraid to say what we don't know, right? Everybody assumes that we're the smartest, we know this, instead of saying, I don't know. And that's why I'm forever grateful to Angela and When We All Vote and all the stuff that I've been taught about voting and education. And it doesn't just stop there. You know, you start talking about COVID and everything that's going on right now. We're not educated on health, right? And eating and our different health choices. So, you know, I am a black man. Obviously, I paid a lot of attention to my father growing up. So for me, I think the coolest part about the times that we're in is the fact that we're starting to talk to one another, right? Start to have real conversations, educate each other, and finally start to come together, because for so long we've been put against each other. Everything is versus. I can do what he doing. I can do what he doing. And as long as we continue to communicate the way we are, I think we headed for change.
Man, I couldn't appreciate your response to that more, in part because the stigma amongst black men about just sharing the vulnerability. Yeah. You said what we don't know. And I think that goes side by side with this perception that we always have to be strong. that we always have to put on this armor that shows that we're in charge. That's why my daddy, when he would drive around the neighborhood and everybody else's neighborhood so much, because the brother was lost and would not ask for instructions or directions. Yeah. And so your example of just being willing to show that level of vulnerability, I think helps to get us just a little bit further down that path. Angela?
It really does. Chris, I just want to take this moment to say thank you. I know you squeezed us in. We had some technical difficulties earlier, but we're so grateful to see you.
I tried. It wasn't for the lack of trying. I tried.
No.
Thank you for
on our
back.
side. That wasn't on you at all. So I was just telling you thank you for making time again after all of that. We really appreciate you and all the work you did in the field.
That's right. Keep it up, man. Wishing you well.
Appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Congressmember Karen Bass is the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus and also working diligently now on the Jobs and Justice Act. Congressmember Bass, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, I'm happy to be here and happy to see both of you.
You too, Congresswoman.
Thrill. If you don't mind, we haven't gotten into all of the nitty-gritty yet about an agenda and the importance of building one. It's gotta be frustrating though, to be in your shoes and to hear all of this chatter about we don't have no black agenda, nobody's ever working on one. Y'all had a 155-page white paper that was turned into a bill. Talk about that process and why it's so important for people to understand the significant work of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Absolutely. And Angela, you know better than most how difficult it is just to get our message out because trust me, we are working on so many different issues. You mentioned the jobs and justice legislation, which is actually 200 pieces of legislation. It's 4,000 pages. And basically it covers just about every issue that our community faces. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is absolutely a transformative piece of legislation. It's composed of bills that individual members of the caucus had been working on for a long time. But it took the horrific torture and murder of George Floyd, the millions of people that protested literally around the world, for the political will to be there to actually move a bill forward where all of the Democrats voted for it. And Angela, you know that was just not the case before. You couldn't get Democrats on a policing bill, and to get all of the Democrats and 3 Republicans on the bill, it sits in Senator McConnell's graveyard. But, you know, I am very hopeful before the night or the week is over that we will have taken Democratic control of the Senate and won the presidency so that we can put it on President Biden and Vice President Harris's desk.
All right.
In January.
We got a Chair Bass projection coming up here.
We're claiming that right there. I received that, every word of it, Congresswoman.
Claiming it.
My advice to how you can get more attention for what y'all are doing in the caucus is do less. Apparently, Donald Trump does practically nothing on criminal justice reform, does nothing on getting people their rights restored. But all of a sudden, this man's the savior for all of Black America. Now, I'm joking. I'm going to get to something serious here, which is to say, one, I don't know of someone who has arrived in Congress as accomplished and as decorated a legislator, a lawmaker, a deal maker without compromising your core belief system and the things that brought you to this work in the first place. What I love about this Congresswoman is that she started as an organizer herself, began organization, putting people to work, bringing the issues of the community first and forefront, and then navigated her way through the corridors of power while at the same time staying deeply cinched in the community. And I gotta say, that isn't the majority experience in the place that you get to sit and make decisions. And so I'm wondering for you, as we think about the 4 Black men right now, tonight, who we're waiting for their results to come in the U.S. Senate races across this country. I'm thinking about the young person who wants to have an impact, but isn't wealthy enough, didn't come from the right background in the right schools, but wants to be able to have its footprint and its fingerprint on how things can change, and more specifically, to the brothers out there who know what's wrong when they see it happening, but yet feel so disempowered and disconnected from the system, so much so that they withdraw from it completely until something changes. How are we how are you and how is the caucus working to build? I know the work y'all are doing in the halls, and I know that you got your constituent works, which drags you every which direction. But I'm sensing a crisis here of hopelessness and an absence of a future, and we got to get to that somehow.
Absolutely. And, you know, from one organizer to another, because that's you as well, we know that we have to have long-term strategies and tactics in place and to do the organizing work. So I will tell you that one of the things that the Black Caucus did this year to attempt to address this is at the beginning of the year, before COVID, we had an emergency summit because we knew that this was going to be a critical year. But at the beginning of the year, we thought it was critical because of the census and because of the election. A few weeks after the summit, we get hit with COVID, and you know that out of those 230,000 dead Americans, that a disproportionate percentage of them are Black, Brown, Asian, and Native American. And so we started holding telephone town halls, Zoom meetings. We have held, geez, I don't even know how many, 20 or 30 on every different subject that you could think of, so that we could expand our outreach. Because the caucus, again, the biggest frustration is getting our word out about what we're actually doing. Because Andrew, when you're talking about the Black men who feel hopeless, I view that as my responsibility to tell them what they get when they vote.
That's right.
You know, I'm tired of just telling people to vote, and then we don't show them what they get from their vote. But that's my responsibility to do that. So we've tried to work very hard. We've had these telephone town halls and Zoom calls once or twice a week on different subjects. And we're having one tomorrow, as a matter of fact, looking at the courts. Because while we have focused on what's in front of us, the Republicans have had this long-term strategy of essentially taking over the third branch of the government. There's the executive, the presidency, the Senate and the House, the legislative, and then there's the judiciary. They took over the branch of government that gets lifetime appointments. We have to figure out what we're going to do about that.
That's right.
That's exactly right. Ms. Bass, I have to ask you, I know you're busy in a race of your own, of course, with members being elected every 2 years. I want to know if there's another race that's front of mind to you, or if there's a ballot initiative that you're paying close attention to in California. I know you're paying attention to the whole thing, but if you had to pick one, what's one thing you really want this viewing audience to be aware of?
Oh, I can't just pick one. Give me two.
Okay, I'll take two.
Yeah, brilliant, right there.
Proposition 15, which overturns the property tax initiative that essentially took all the money out of schools many, many years ago, and it provided an exemption for major commercial properties like Disneyland, for example. They're paying the same amount of taxes today that they were paying in the 1970s. And then Proposition 16, that puts affirmative action back into state policy. So here's what I'm really excited about, and I want you to hear this, Andrew. Over the years in California, we have built the capacity to put our own ballot initiatives on. So we have ballot initiatives covering criminal justice reform as well. We've reached the capacity as activists and organizers to raise the money, to do the ground game, to put our own ballot initiatives on, and we have several on the ballot today. So I just stopped at 2. We have some more.
Look, you can go on as far as I'm concerned. Now, Angela's running the clock here.
No, I'm just trying to make sure we don't keep you too long, and of course we don't run over. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, so this is, I don't want to get nobody in trouble, Congresswoman, Madam Chair, but
that's okay.
This presidential race has created quite an interesting set of bedfellows. People who may have issue and policy disagreements, who have set those to the side for the sake of the presidency and, frankly, just getting back to a place of reasonable. Whereas there are a lot of progressives around the country who are right now sitting mum. They voted for Joe Biden because they want a Democrat, and they want you to be able to lobby him for a stronger progressive agenda. Yep. But I feel that there may be a reckoning coming should we have our desires and we get a Biden-Harris ticket. As a leader in our party, I'm curious to know how you all are thinking about how we navigate. I just don't know that it can be kicked down the street much longer. People have real anxiety about these kinds of issues becoming top of the agenda for Democrats when they get power.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think a couple of things. We have to make sure that President Biden and Vice President Harris have a Democratic Senate, or we know what will happen. They will not be able to govern. So that's, issue number one.
Yeah.
But in terms of what they have to deal with, from my point of view, we can't get to anything else on the agenda until we deal with COVID. We have to stop our people from dying, literally. And we are not going to be able to get the economy back together until we deal with COVID. So that's where I believe there's a strong basis of unity. Because even though people might have an agenda where they want Medicare for all or Green New Deal or whatever, we have got to keep our people alive. And right now we're on track to have another 200,000 people potentially die before they're even sworn in. It's just unbelievable.
It's incredibly unbelievable, and a complete, total disregard and dereliction of duty by the President of the United States, and he has led his administration down this same clueless, science-less rabbit hole, which has resulted in the death of lives that could have otherwise been preserved. Congresswoman, you are extremely generous for having given us the time that you have this evening. We are pulling for you. I'm in Florida, but I adopt you as my Congresswoman as well.
All right.
Keep leading, keep glowing, keep growing. You're a real leader, a real bright spot for so many of us around the country.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's great to be with you and great to see you both again.
Alicia just talked about independent Black political power, not necessarily citing party affiliation, but the idea that we can be free from the burdens of a party construct and always vote our interests. What do you think is the pathway to getting us a little bit closer to that reality, Jamel?
Well, I mean, I've tried to explain this to people that it's not that Black people have just some overwhelming gratitude and attraction to the Democratic Party. It's just that they have just been the easiest pathway. That's it. And so I still think that the best pathway is through them, only because the systems and what we have come to mean to their party and frankly, their survival will allow us to hold them accountable in another way. I like to steal something that Chuck D told me when he did my podcast recently, is that with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you see an hourglass. At some point the sand runs out. Right? So we know that if they get into office, it's not about an overwhelming, blinding support of them, but we know if they get into office, there is a pathway in which we can say, hey, you didn't do this, so therefore you gotta go. And everybody's comfortable and cool and okay with that. So I think, one of the discussions that got lost as we were in this very highly emotional, polarizing political cycle, that the endorsement of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris was never about the fact that we were so all in on them, that we believed that they were perfect candidates. It was because we knew that there was an agenda that we could achieve through them, and frankly, without them, if need be, and that they would have to hold themselves accountable to us. As I told many people, look, if they get elected, this is just the baby step. This is just step one, all right? The real work begins as soon as they're in office. We cannot afford to fall asleep at the wheel like we did before when Barack Obama was in office. And I hope, prayerfully, now everybody understands that.
First of all, it's great to be here with such an august panel, younger folk, being a gray-haired old man, hanging out with you young Wunderkinds is a beautiful thing. You're
gonna use a lot of words.
The thing is, Howard Thurman, the great African-American mystic, said, refuse the temptation to reduce your dreams to the event which is before you, right? So he said, either you can be a prisoner of the event or you can be a prisoner of hope. Because he said our slave foreparents with the long rolls of cotton and the rawhide whip of the overseer cracking against our flesh, they imagined a future that was nearly impossible at the moment of conception. And yet we are the living, breathing manifestation of the investment of ancestors who could scarcely begin to conjure the phenomenal reality that we are. So I am not discouraged tonight. I am not in despair tonight, because what I know is this is a long road. This ain't no sprint. This is a marathon. We don't need Nipsey Hussle to remind us that the marathon continues. But it does mean that at every point we check in with each other to make sure we are diligent. As Ms. Garza just said, we got to make sure that we find out how serious we are. If you got a plan for Black America that you shown to both presidents, show it to me after the election is over. Show it to me now after the consummation and climax of a ritual of political engagement that never had you or me in mind in the first place. Now is the time to step up. We always got a Black agenda. Black agendas in barbershops and beauty shops, as well as, with the beautiful, brilliant folk you have on this panel. Whether it's Ibram Kendi or Sister Rakia or Sister Alicia, this is the reality that we have no dearth of insight, no dearth of imagination. Every Black folk I meet got self-published books. They say Negroes are illiterate. Every Black person I got a desire to get on and be something serious when they say we're nothing. So in other words, we have to ignore the Trumpism that will trumpet to us that we don't mean anything. And the thing we discovered in this election was not simply Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, it's us. We discovered that we mean more to us than we realize, and we were forced into a position to recognize the beauty, the value, and the worth of our humanity. Because Black Lives Matter has to mean something to us first. We have to check ourselves, our prejudice against trans people, our prejudice against gay people, or lesbian people, or poor people, or people who live out in the country, not in the city. We have to really discover who we are first. And so the word I have is what the Negroes and the Black people and the Africans and the colored folks say, irregardless. Now that's belt and suspender, right? That's belt and suspender. Brother say, irregardless of what happens, I'm going to stand here. If Biden is in the White House, irregardless of his presence there, we've got to leverage the power, the intelligence, and the beauty of our Blackness to hold him and the vice president accountable. If Donald Trump is there, we know that we have to push as hard as we can against the vicious and the vitriolic expressions of white supremacy and a resurgent bigotry, but we also have to call ourselves to account and say we got to love each other more deeply, love each other more powerfully, love each other more tolerantly. And when we discover that, that will be a power that will set an agenda that will not only be for the president of the United States of America or for political realities, but an agenda for Black self-determination in the midst of a white supremacist culture that is fundamentally inimical and hostile to our being. When we do that, then, my brothers and sisters, we congregate, we constitute, and we create a cosmos of meaning that takes Blackness as its origin point. Now, let me end by saying this. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I know y'all jealous because y'all want to be from Detroit and y'all can't be from Detroit.
We good. I'm good.
I learned in growing up in Detroit, before we had a Black mayor, before we had Black folk who were politically aligned with a particular party, we had Black people in the womb of Black expectation that was invisible to the dominant white supremacist world. And in the making of that invisibility, we created worldviews, we created possibilities. Aretha Franklin, The Temptations, The Four Tops. We created Stevie Wonder, Stephen Morris on the Block. We created music that Negroes had not even heard of in 1959 with Berry Gordy and Smokey Robinson. And then we unleashed that on the world. This is the moment of self-recreation and self-rebegetting, as Emerson said, to create a Black world that will save the larger world in which we exist. That's why, regardless, irregardless, I am hopeful.
All right. How to be an anti-racist.
Yes.
Doc, tell me, how'd you start there? Where do you feel, where do you feel the gumption of being able to help educate the majority population on the fact that you just can't say, I'm not something, but how you go further to be anti what that thing is? Can you talk us through a little bit the titling, but really more than that, all that is working underneath that? Such an inspiring piece of work.
Well, I mean, let me just say, I'm just truly honored to be a part of this panel. And like Alicia said, there's nowhere I'd rather be than with each of you. And in many ways, I've realized that, I wrote that book, but in many ways, Donald Trump wrote the book for me. Because in many ways, for 4 years, at the same time, he was, splitting up families at the border. At the same time, he was saying Black people live in hell. At the same time, he was demeaning Latinx countries and certainly countries in Africa. At the same time, he was calling majority Black Baltimore a rat and rodent infested mess where no human being would want to live in. At the same time, he was demeaning Black woman journalist after Black woman journalist. He was also saying, I'm the least racist person there is anywhere in the world. He was also saying, I'm the least racist person you've ever interviewed. I'm the least racist person you've ever encountered. I'm the least racist person you've ever met. And then he had the audacity to tell everybody, when everybody was watching, I'm the least racist person in the room. And then he said it twice.
To a Black moderator.
To a Black moderator, right? And I think what many white Americans saw was themselves. That indeed, when they were saying there was something lazy about Black people, when they were saying Black people were dangerous, when they were saying Black people should be getting killed by the police more, when they were saying, of course, there's going to be a racial wealth gap because Black people won't save. And then we were challenging him as being racist. And then they were responding, no, I'm not racist. They were, in a sense, sounding just like Donald Trump. And so in many ways, they were mirroring sort of the very person that they were calling racist.
Yeah.
And so what that means is indeed this sort of denial that they saw in Trump, they saw in themselves. And I think in many ways, one of the things that I've been trying to communicate to them and to really all of us, that indeed that denial is at the heartbeat of racism itself. Slave traders, slaveholders, Jim Crow segregationists, lynchers, Jim Crow, you name the people, they denied that they were racist. And they blamed us, the victims of their brutality, for being the victims of their brutality, just as they are today. And so in many ways, we need to sort of think differently. We need to be differently. We need to be anti-racist. We have to be willing, particularly white folks, to confess and acknowledge and recognize and admit the ways in which their country is being racist, the way in which they're being racist. Because how could they ever move to a different place conceptually? How can we even transform this country if people are swearing because one person got elected to one office in 2008 that suddenly the country is no longer racist?